Welcome to the Hartnell College Math Review. Part of the point of these problems is that it would be good review for the AccuPlacer placement test at Hartnell College. Also, it's just meant as a review for anybody that wants to review some pre-algebra. We're going to do beginning algebra, intermediate algebra, and then pre-calculus. There's going to be about 100 of these podcast problems working all the way through pre-calculus. To begin with, over here, we should, following the order of operations, work inside the parentheses first. So PEMDAS, as I remember it, or some people say, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally to help remember, says you need to work inside parentheses first. If there's any exponents, you need to work on those second. Next, these two are actually grouped together. Next, do any multiplication or division. And last, group these two together. Last, work on addition and subtraction. So, parentheses first. So work inside the parentheses, and combining the 5 and 6 makes an 11. So nothing else is going to change except what's inside the parentheses becomes an 11. Notice that right here you cannot subtract 2 minus 3 because this 3 is being multiplied with the 11, and we need to do that multiplication before we can do any addition or subtraction. So multiplying here is going to be a negative 33, so a negative 3 times a positive will be negative 33. At that point we don't need the parentheses anymore because the parentheses implied we were multiplying, and we're done with that. Now you can do addition and subtraction, and you can do it in whichever order you like. I think I'm going to group these two negatives together. A negative together with a negative is going to be a negative, and then you combine the numbers, that's going to be 37. So we've then got 2 subtract 37. When the numbers are opposite signs, you actually subtract them, which would be a 35. And because the negative is on the bigger number, then the answer is going to be negative. So negative 35 is our first result. When combining fractions, you need to find what's called the least common denominator. If you can just look at this and say, well, with a 3, a 12, and an 8, I can change all of those into 24, that's going to be the least common denominator. If you can't do it by just looking at it, then you need to factor. So factor a 12 into its prime factors, like a 2 times 6 first of all, and then that's going to be a 2 and a 3. So breaking down into the primes, we know that the least common denominator will have to have a 2, and a 3. Now for the 8, that's going to be 2 times 4, which is then 2 times 2. And of course this can't be factored, so this says we need to have a 3. This also agrees and says we need to have a 3. And then this is saying we need at least 2 2's. But then the 8 says, well, actually we need 3 2's. So once you have these 3 2's, that satisfies what the 8 needs. The 12 needs 2 2's, which is already included over here, but it also needs a 3. So the least common denominator is going to be 2 times a 2 times a 2, which is 8, and then times that 3. So 8 times 3, the least common denominator is 24. Now that means that all of these numbers in the denominator can be multiplied by something, getting a result of 24. So in here, you could multiply by an 8. But the thing is with fractions, if you multiply the bottom by an 8, you have to multiply the top by 8. So that would be 16 over 24 for the first fraction. This one could be multiplied by 2 on the top and the bottom again by the same thing. So this one is 10 over 24. And this could be multiplied by 3 on the top and the bottom. So the third fraction is 9 over 24. Now that I've got all of the denominators as 24, I can add the fractions and know that the denominator will be a 24. Next, I just need to add the numerators. So the order doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and put the 16 together with the 9, making it 25, and then 10 more would make it 35. Now we're almost done. You just have to make sure that this 35 over 24 is reduced. So is there something you could divide into both 35 and 24 and thus reduce the fraction? Well, the only two things you could really divide into 35 would be a 5, but a 5 won't divide into this because it doesn't end in a 5 or a 0. And a 7 could divide into 35, but 7 will not divide into 24. 7 would divide into 21 or 28, but not 24. So this one is already done. All right, now for these two other problems right here. Well, this one has parentheses, but if you look inside, there's no way to reduce x minus 2. So instead, we need to use what's called the distributive property. So the parentheses mean that this negative 3 is multiplying with what's inside the parentheses. Distributive property says go ahead and do that. Multiply the negative 3 with the x and multiply the negative 3 with that negative 2. For the first step, everything else is going to stay the same. So negative 3 times x, a negative times a negative will be a positive 6, and then just recopy the other terms. Alright, now there's this very common idea in math that you can only combine like terms. For example, you can combine x's with x's. So there's negative 3 of them and negative 9 of them makes a grand total of negative 12 of them. So that means we've got negative 12 x's. When adding or subtracting and the signs are the same, you add the numbers together, the 3 and the 9 is 12, and then you just keep the sign. In here, you keep that negative sign for negative 12. That takes care of the x's. The other thing is the number 2, 6, and 3 are also like terms because they are whole numbers. They don't have x's, so they can't be combined with the x's, but they can be combined with each other. So we can add them in this order. A 6 and a 3 is 9. 2 more makes 11. And it's positive, so plus 11. And then for the last part, we again use the distributive property. So 2/3 gets multiplied with b. 2/3 gets multiplied with the negative w. So that's 2/3 times b, and then minus 2/3 that gets multiplied with w. Distributive property again, w times 6 and w times b. So that's going to be 6w. It's tradition to write the number first and then the letter. And then plus wb. And then finally, minus 4. So again, we have to look for like terms. Well, this has a b in it, but this, as far as letters are concerned, has both a w and a b, so those are not like terms. This has a number and a w, this has a number and a w, so these are the ones that we can combine. So the result is going to be something w. You just have to look at the numbers. It's 6 minus 2/3. So I could over here on some scratch paper, see how much is 6 minus 2/3. Now there's a couple of ways to do it. One way is you say, well, this 6 is 6 over 1. I need a common denominator. That's going to be a 3. So I have to multiply this on the top and the bottom by 3. The first number becomes 18 over 3 minus the 2/3. Then the result is going to be something thirds, and then you just subtract. 18 minus 2 is 16. And a 3 will not divide into a 16, so it doesn't have to be reduced. Now, all of that was for the w terms. So the result is 16 over 3 w. And then notice everything else does not have something to combine with, so you just recopy them. Plus 2/3 b plus wb minus 4. One quick note on the AccuPlacer test, it's multiple choice, which actually makes it a little bit easier because, for example, here, I had no way of checking my answer. But with the AccuPlacer test, you would just look, they would have 3, 4, or 5 choices to choose from. If negative 35 is not there, then you go back and redo the problem and try to find out if you made any mistakes. Here, I didn't.